Hello, digital community. Thank you for tuning back into In Circle, where we explore the intersection between personal empowerment, mysticism, and real-world activism. Today, we are diving into the realm of practical magic that happens when women gather. And not gathering just for a casual girls' night, as fun as those are, gathering in the way that our ancestors did. Elders, maidens, mothers, and children of all ages coming together, connecting via the intelligence of our native feminine wisdom, exchanging resources, skills, support, and sincere heart-led intimacy. This movement of remembering the original ways of healthy communal living and relating is what I lovingly call reviving the village template. We are joined today by a woman I deeply respect and admire, Jenny Lee. A healing artist, breathwork guide, community builder, musician, and the founder of my favorite women's gathering to date, the Temple of Belonging. The Temple of Belonging is a 4-day women's retreat and intentional gathering held in Oregon. Masterfully curated with workshops, ceremonies, artists and crafters, nutrient-rich catered meals, wellness services. Gosh, I could go on, trust me. It is amazing. I even got a spontaneous Tesha fan. And while I've only engaged with Jenny over the years in the context of Temple of Belonging, there's something about her I can tell for certain. This is a woman who I believe walks in integrity. It's clear that Jenny has put her whole heart, body, and soul into offering this women's gathering in a good way. In a way countless of us deeply need, but may not even know it. She facilitates and orchestrates this annual multi-day retreat with a rare balance of bold leadership and earth-rooted humility. And that care offers a tangible ripple effect, felt amongst all the layers of production and execution. Jenny, thank you so much for being here with me today. Would you please share with us the journey that led to the creation of Temple of Belonging? Were there pivotal moments or influences that shaped your vision for this gathering? And of course, please feel welcome to chime in on anything else bubbling up in your heart in this moment.
Oof. Well, I'm just all teary-eyed. That's such a sweet intro, and I don't have the opportunity to see it outside of my own eyes or outside of my own laboring, the efforting, and so I'm just touched.
It's the truth.
So many things. I think my childhood on one hand was very unmothered, and that created an experience of wanting the thing that we didn't have, pretty normal in that pattern of how we seek the thing that we didn't get when we were in our developmental ages and stages, mixed with quite a few years of not feeling safe around women. I was always one of the guys, one of the bros. And in my mid-20s, which I would say is a little late for my preference, but life doesn't really care about my preferences that much, was this really obvious need to return to the loving embrace and care of women, to understand myself as a woman. In fact, I was not a bro, and my biological and my emotional, my psychological needs as a woman were being pretty consistently cast aside or ignored or disregarded, right? And so in my mid to late 20s was when I was I need women, and I need to find women and be with women in a good way where it's safe and fun and interesting. And also I need to be that woman for other women. And so I called in that prayer pretty fiercely in my own way, which had its own pros and cons. And then it was at my very first women's gathering, which was Origins, right before COVID. So 2019. And it was just the best. It was the peak moment of these years of re-womaning myself, re-relating to women as beloveds, as collaborators and not competition. And then going to Origins was just this bloom of ease and joy, and my chronic back pain disappeared, and I just knew that it was the men. And I was this is the best. And all of my fears about what might happen at a women's gathering were just quelled by the sincerity and the sweetness and the bravery and the creativity. And what happens, maybe to your point in the introduction, when women gather, not to have a slumber party and paint our nails, but when women gather to actually be together in generative and creative and skill building and wisdom sharing ways, when there's togetherness and a triangulation point where it's like we're here with each other, but we're also here for the thing that we're focusing on, that we're building, that we're healing, that we're creating. And it was just delightful. And then I quickly realized that I didn't want to drive to California to go have girl time in a good way. And, you know, the other really incredible women's gathering that I know of is Spirit Weavers that I've never gone, because tickets always sell out in a day. And I was also like, that's not accessible. And so there's these really beautiful models that I just got to piggyback on in some way, where I'm not reinventing the wheel, but it just became really clear. I was like, well, I want this at my house. And I have the kind of personality that's overly confident. And I was like, I'll just make my own. And we did. And the locality piece has felt really important, but we just did it at my house the first year on the land that I live on. And it worked. And then it was like, oh shit. Okay. So now what is this going to become? And now, like, coming into our 4th year, it's really taken on a life and a heartbeat and legs and dreams of its own. And it's pretty humbling to see how much has grown. And it's really comforting and inspiring to see that I'm not alone in wanting this, in wanting a local place, in wanting a place for women to come and just enjoy the shit out of each other again, right? It doesn't have to be that complicated, and yet we do like to make it a little bit more complicated.
Well, women are complex beings, aren't we?
Yeah, very much so.
I love hearing all of this because it truly speaks to the experience that myself and so many other women have had in the greater landscape of our culture, that we are remembering how we can gather, not in the context of the focal point, as you said, like capitalism of let's get our nails done, which can be fun for sure. But like a lot of times that's the focal point that we've been attuned to, of like drama or shopping or like all of these things that aren't really rooted in our nature as women. And so when I found Temple of Belonging and went my first year, I was just like, this is the greatest breath of fresh air. Like how you've described with Origins. Like, because for so many years, I didn't know that a gathering like that was possible. That women could gather in this way and pray together and connect together in a deeply heart-centered, honest way that's also playful and authentic and deeply honest with who we are and the focal point of where we want humanity to be birthed from. And so I deeply resonate with that. And I thank you for that. It also takes a lot of courage to be able to claim, like, I don't see gatherings like this being super accessible in my landscape, so I'm going to start my own. Like, that's incredible. And I recognize that too. I felt that similarly living in Portland, where I was not exposed to enough red tents or women's gatherings that I really resonated with. So I started my own. But there's that bravery of being the one that goes first and is showing the way of women. There's a better way we can do this. So let's play, let's experiment together and allow this to be a playground that we co-create. So from your experience, I'm curious, what do you believe is the deeper significance of women gathering in sacred spaces like Temple of Belonging or these women's gatherings? And what do you think is possible for individual and collective healing when we gather in this way?
I mean, what I'm learning is that why and what's possible is so different for each person. And I love that. It's hard to articulate it because the Temple of Belonging has been life-changing for so many people, but in so many different areas. And yet underneath it all, there seems to be this, like, I mean, even just in this conversation, I can feel just how soft my little heart is, and how much I want to be in love with my sisters. You know, that there's just like this soul level ache that I think women have carried for many generations of being with each other in sensuality and creativity and wisdom and warriorness, in business, in lovership, like whatever. And that feeling is very somatic for me and other women, as far as I can tell, that we belong to each other. Like, and how often do I or another woman try to be understood and met from these places or men, or, you know, that just inherently cannot, and I don't think are supposed to, understand the depth and the sensitivity and the brilliance and the power of being a woman. And so, at a minimum, it feels like a balm to the heart of a woman who is so much, who is so vast and so complex and intense and genius, that has had to small herself just through from the pattern that's perpetuated itself throughout culture, throughout time. And I think what's possible is that when a woman is met and nourished and can feel safe and seen, then she no longer needs to seek that approval from inappropriate places. And to me, that's like a pathway to peace in our partnerships and our loverships. That's a pathway to peace in our families. That's a pathway to peace in our relationship to the earth, to people that we don't like, to whatever, where when the woman is like fed and she sinks back in herself and she sees another woman and the first thought isn't competition or judgment, the first like reaction is this hello, fellow human, fellow woman, fellow being that is worthy of love and regard. Right? Like, what if that was the default setting? And I don't know if that's, you know, possible from doing an annual gathering, but why not? On one hand, why not? But I think what's possible is the softening of the ache for each other in a world that has been hyper individualized. And when we're not afraid of each other, I mean, it's so obvious to me, right? How we can engage with our macro and our micro communities and relationships without having what am I calling it, non-consensual agreements to get our needs met and to be acknowledged from people that have not agreed to do that for us.
Yes. Yes. Speak more. Tell me more.
Maybe it's like this inner resourcing, right? And you know, I'm not prone to go so far into the realm of like dismantling the patriarchy. Like, I'm more of just like, we just need to love each other and that will ripple out and have an effect that I think will maybe be something like that. But that's not the goal. For me, the goal is to like, well, think about this in somatics, like crowding out the conditioning, crowding out the fear and the scarcity and the competition, which so often we're like, oh, let go of our conditioning, heal from our traumas and da 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 da, which I'm all about. But I think I like being filled with love and connection and safety so that those other patterns just don't have room at the table anymore. And there's less like pushing and forcing these things to change instead of like, sorry, house party's full with a bunch of people that actually love themselves. Sorry, we're at capacity. Come back and check in an hour. And hopefully we'll still be full at that point as well.
I love that. That is so good. I can absolutely see that as a breakdown of the ways that we as women are oftentimes societally conditioned to resource from the men we date or whoever we date, you know, or our jobs, whatever external thing might be, to make us feel a sense of self-worth, to make us feel nourished. And then really what we're lacking is that nourishment and resource from sisterhood, from safety with real deep intimate feminine relationships. And when we fill ourselves up with that yes, that full body yes, then those things, those external ties that may not have served us in as clean of a way, there's just, it's not shaming them or like, you know, excluding those other relations. It's just raising the bar, raising the standard of we're here for love and juiciness, acceptance, and that's what we got room for.
And we're so ready for it. I think that's what surprised me. Like, I know what my prayer is. I know what my wounds are. And this is what I've chosen to like devote a large part of myself to. And I don't expect that everybody else feels the same way. And yet every year at the gathering, it's just like, we're like malnourished and people they're just eating it up. They're like, fuck, I am so hungry and afraid, right? And intimidated and like, whoa, there's this beautiful thing that I've actually always wanted and convinced myself that it might never even exist, that I can't have it or whatever the stories and the conditioning are. And then you're like, no, it's real. And it's like, okay, I'll try it. Like, we also have to build the capacity for that which we want. Having too much cake Not a good idea. Probably got to build up to eating a whole cake. That's really what it's about. Getting as much sugar at one time as you can. No, just kidding. But to your point of like what we've learned, and I've learned a lot of this from you as well, is like we're hungry for it. I think we're ready for it. And when you enter into the space, all of the barriers that you've built against it will become present. And they're not anyone's fault, but they are our responsibility, right? To say, oh, I have inherited a whole, oh no, I hate it when it does the thumbs up. that we've inherited a whole lineage and an experience, a genetic experience of being terrified of other women for various degrees. But, if you break it down, what women couldn't get a bank account till the 70s.
Yeah.
And so literally men were a resource for survival, and you can't fuck with anybody's survival needs because they're gonna protect themselves. And so I can see even just in the past 100, 200 years, the way that women, like this freedom to just enjoy each other and enjoy our lives and be in our power and be in our medicine wasn't accessible. Like you didn't leave the house until you found someone to marry that was going to take care of you. And that wasn't that long ago. And I have a lot of patience for us all in how long it's going to take for some of these patterns to like fall off like dead skin, right? Once there's a new vitality that comes from within. But, I think the simplicity of not having that resource that we need to compete over, AKA men, if that's the kind of thing you're attracted to and you relate to, which not having that there, I think is helpful in reminding us that we actually do really want to love each other and that we actually do really trust ourselves. I think it's important to consider why women have this hunger, why women don't feel safe with each other, why women have been conditioned and patterned to have these skin deep, shallow-ish relationships that are broadly focused on beauty standards and maybe even like fetishizing youthfulness, which is super weird to me. And back in the day, women couldn't leave the safety of the home unless they found a man to provide for them and marry them. And like we were pawned kind of in some ways to be assets to move around in people's games of life. And so let's say women couldn't get their own bank accounts till the 70s. Well, the 70s wasn't that long ago. And to me, it's so obvious. And once again, it's not anybody's fault. Like the blame game doesn't work. Here we are. But when we take the thing that we traditionally fight over that can create scarcity, whether that's men in this instance, or whether that's housing, whether that's privilege, whether that's attention in this day and age, right? Whatever is the thing that we fight over that we are convinced will give us safety, will position people against each other. So basically, a women's gathering is just taking out the threats. And then we have to reckon with how much those threats, how much that scarcity, how much that limited resource of male attention, provisionship, all the things, right, has become ingrained in our systems. Like, how do we actually learn to see women not as competition as we fight over this resource of attention? And it's so subtle. And I hate to, it's not about that, but it is, you know what I mean? But it's so subtle where I'm like, if I'm in a grocery store and this happens to be all women in the grocery store, which I don't think has ever happened, but there's something that shifts in the field, right? Where it's the sensation of like, there's enough food here for everybody and enough for seconds. And, actually now that I'm thinking about it, maybe going back to your prior question of like, what are the implications of this? When we feel like we're no longer in scarcity, all of our resources are met, all of our needs for connection and inspiration at the gathering itself, it's like you're fed, you have your camping gear, like all of the stuff that we really stress about in our daily lives is handled. We can come back into our natural state, which is loving, which is trusting, which is inspired, right? So many women have left the gathering and like started new business projects or started new things because they have the energy to create, to birth, to do something beautiful because they've been able to step out of our normal reality where we're constantly unconsciously fighting for these little bits and pieces of things that we think we need to feel safe and to feel loved. I think women want to have a good time and they don't want to overcomplicate it. And within that good time, I want to be able to laugh as much as I want to be able to do a womb clearing, as much as I want to be able to do a hot, sexy dance party, as much as I want to do like pelvic floor work. And it all gets to be there. But there's like a stoicism and or a seriousness to a lot of spiritual communities that makes it not that accessible. And so I think my personal prayer has to been to keep it on the ground. You know, like be bitchy, be hilarious, be whatever, like just come. And that to me is the most refreshing. There's room for it all. And as soon as there's a little tinge of you need to be different to feel belonging, it's not belonging. As soon as there's a little speck of my preference is that you are not blank, the whole thing unravels. And so, at least in my heart, as the founder and the creator, there's been just this has to be for everybody or it's for nobody. Obviously, that's not true because it is just for women. So there is a pretty obvious line there. And it's like for my mom who's had tons of plastic surgery and is a real estate agent. And it's for the woman who like, you know, slaughters sheep and likes to have her composting toilet and everybody in between. Because underneath these choices and identities, there's still a woman that wants to be in love with other women. And not because we're the same, but because we can, because we just can. It's not hard to be with each other in a good way and say, wow, you're totally different. That's awesome. Great. And I think that it enters into the realm of like my own studies of what belonging actually is. And there's a huge conditioned understanding that belonging is sameness, that belonging is homogenization, that belonging is we pray to the same God. And if that's belonging, then like I'm not interested. And you know, that even the name, the Temple of Belonging, like it came to me on a run one day. I had no idea what to do with it. And now we've stuck with it. And it's pretty audacious. And I'm like, okay, temple is a triggering word for a lot of people. So is belonging. And I'm like, what have we done here? But it's just kind of this constant invitation to say, okay, well, this is what it wanted to be. So what does belonging look like on the ground without the pretenses, without these assumptions? And similar with temple, frankly, you know, it's like I grew up without any religion. And I still don't have a religion, but I have a deep spirituality. And, you know, I mean, this is probably your line of genius where women's temple, like we used to tend the temple together in this way where women came together to create an experience, to like worship creation itself. And I do believe that that's what we're doing, but we're not all in white linen. We come with our kids. We come with broken hearts. We come and we still end up judging each other a little bit because that pattern's really old. And we do our best, right, to remember and titrate into a new memory of what it feels like to be around women in a good way. And then if we keep making more memories of that, then you know, we can crowd out the old memories that say, oh my God, 300 women? Get the fuck out of here. No thanks. That sounds terrifying. Instead of, I remember what it's like to be around women and it's so inspiring and it's so exciting and comforting. And then it just keep rippling out forever.
The ultimate womb fractal. Yeah.
Womb fractal. We should have called it womb fractal, wouldn't it?
That's definitely what it is on like an energetic level.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I really so resonate with that level of honest authenticity that is so welcome at Temple of Belonging because
it's almost required, right? Like without it, then what is it?
Right. The levels of diversity via age, background, whoever someone is in the matrix world, you can find just about all of it, but people are coming together via a shared thread of that honest desire to connect. And I find that so incredibly refreshing as a safe place for me to unwind and be vulnerable in compared to, you're right, a lot of more stale type gatherings that we've seen where there's kind of like a dress code and a protocol and a lexicon, a language that like you use to be able to fit in certain, especially spiritual places.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, we put down our masks when we don't have to do that. When we don't
Mm.
have to posture or peacock. And it's just like, hi, like, you're right. Like, I'm a messy human. You're a messy human. Let's roll in the dirt.
Yeah, let's quit pretending like we're not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's like that one liner that's like, I trust people that know they have a shadow.
Right.
You know, there's a piece of it. And actually, maybe to answer your prior question more, I've had to trust that the gathering knows what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that anytime I try to, you know, there's like, I'm equally protecting the spirit of the gathering to be as authentic and on the ground and for like the real woman as possible. And that protection includes me not over meddling, not micromanaging. I mean, let's be real. I can't
Mm-hmm.
not because it's my baby. But, you know, like energetically, there's this, like, it's going to be what it's going to be. And whoever's going to come is who's going to come. And I'm holding this prayer. The gathering is holding the prayer. This whole growing, beautiful, badass community is holding this prayer. And then whatever happens, happens. But I think there's also this softness and spirit of allowance that, like, okay, someone's going to think that the gathering is blank. Great. Let them think it. Someone's going to come and not feel welcomed. Great. That's allowed because it's impossible for every single person to come to feel utter belonging. Like, let's be real. And so I think there's a level of maturity that we've all had to learn, frankly, of how to trust that life knows what it's doing, that our prayer is clear. Life knows what we're here to do. And we just have to keep getting out of the way while also keeping our eyes up. And it's been really fun to keep building the trust with the gathering and the community that it's attracting and the community that it's supporting and the community that's supporting it. You know, it's like I'll never get over how mind blown I am that it worked. You know, and it's going to keep working in the way of being a really simple and epic thing.
I remember you spoke to that at the closing ceremony last year of there might be some women who don't feel belonging, and that's okay. And I remember that really stuck with me because that acceptance of people's experiences and their diversity of it is belonging. Like the whole range of all of our individual experiences and like the colors that we walk in and walk out as, that full acceptance, that full spectrum acceptance of that is what creates the safety and belonging.
Right.
And it sounds like that's one lesson or wisdom that you've earned from your time facilitating Temple of Belonging. Are there any more kind of like nuggets of earned gold wisdom that you feel like have really helped shape your relationship with the gathering and then also just as a woman in general?
I mean, what the sassy answer that comes up first is like, damn, learn how to not take things personally.
Mm-hmm.
That's always required. I've been front row to how much scarcity there is in the field of women since this was happening in my backyard. And it was like $100 for the price of food. I'm on the phone a lot with women that are dealing with financial instability. And scarcity is a harsh word, right? But I just mean it in the true nature of like there's not enough, or there's the belief that there's not enough. And I think that's been the most heartbreaking thing to just realize how much women have been have that experience of not financial stability. And maybe the kind of woman that comes to this maybe isn't going to be a woman from corporate America, but you know, once again, everybody's welcome. But a lot of women that are drawn to this are self starters or self-employed or visionaries and dreamers and people that want to do meaningful shit and maybe get paid less for that in the current structure anyways. And so that's just something that I've been faced with and my own, oh my God, my own, you know, like that I'm not separate from every other woman that comes. We're all shoulder to shoulder in this experience. And so mostly with that, just learning how to hold it and trying not to take it as seriously, but see it as a thematic element that's partially here to be cleared through the entity of the gathering, through women supporting each other, right? Like going back to that feeling of being resourced, that how much, if we believe in ourselves, how does that influence our somatic experience of being paid and having what we need to be who we are in the world. And so I don't know what I've learned, but I've just been acutely aware of that and want to be able to bring more awareness and humility and action steps around that into the gathering in some way. You know, like women and money feel like, I want that. I want that for us. I want that for everybody involved. And, you know, for all the obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something else that I've really learned is it takes tending, and it can't be performative, right? And I think there's a lot of unlearning to do that isn't that cute, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is really required. Like the Temple of Belonging as an event, and we're doing like these quarterly in-person events. It's so obvious to me. And I hate that I say that word all the time, but it's just like, of course, like, duh. It really is this feeling of like, what else? Like, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Then we go back to our partners, our lives, our jobs, our scarcity, our car payments, our dogs, our parents, and it's not, the same feeling isn't there. And I'm noticing just how real and how like humbling and challenging it can be to integrate, to not look at the Temple of Belonging as an event, but as a model of a new way of being in relationship with all of life, right? And I wrote a blog post a long time ago about why event-based healing doesn't work.
Mm.
And maybe that's like a little sassy, but it should be, in my opinion, it should. I'm shooting everybody. I would like it to be like modeling the same way that when we were children, our parents said one thing, but we learned by what they did. And we needed better models broadly. And so that I want the Temple of Belonging to be this model of, one, how to do big, brave, bold shit because we can and life is short. Oh, there goes the thumbs again. Or how to be safe and brave and embodied and soft and open with women that you don't necessarily know just because we can, right? And to build those neural pathways of trust and belonging so that they fire more often outside of the safety of the container.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I wish that we had more consistency to tend that integration. And that's something that I'd like to bring in, you know, but there's a cleverness to how to do that. And there's a cleverness to getting people to show up to things. It's just kind of also inherently challenging sometimes.
That is very true.
Yeah. It's real life.
I respect all of that so much. And an aspect that I love on the money piece with Temple of Belonging is on all of the BIPOC scholarships, the workshops on women in business, women generating wealth, especially again in that context of like women didn't have that kind of financial opportunity until the 70s. So we are rewriting generational stories here together. And also the financial transparency that the Temple of Belonging has the breakdown on the website. I love that so much because, again, it's this authenticity, this honesty of we are just gathering here in the good, honest way and doing our humble best. And we're rewriting all of these patterns together. And there's no scarcity, money, shame here. And ultimately, like, I was kind of laughing at myself when I was planning my year ahead. And I was like, honestly, out of all the gatherings I could go to, Temple of Belonging is my priority. And that to me says a lot of, as someone who has gone to a whole bunch of festivals and gatherings, like to me, I receive so much from Temple of Belonging that investment is always going to be worth it.
Yeah. You know, and like, thank you for saying that. And, you know, it's just so humbling to be in this position of like the mother, the founder, the CEO, the workhorse, whatever, right? Different days have different hats. The maniac, that one's, you know, because in my own scarcity struggles with like doing so much work and getting paid very little because it's a new idea and da 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 da. And the more people, especially like at Temple, when I'm honest and vulnerable about like, I'm afraid I'm not going to get paid for 8 months of full-time work. I met with sisters that I know and don't know that are like, how can we help? Like everybody underneath all the stories, we want each other to be well. This doesn't have to be a zero-sum game where if you are well compensated for your work in the world, then I am less of that. Then there's less for me. Like it's not actually a cake. Going back to the cake, maybe I should have a cake today. You know, and just remembering that there is this like wellspring, this womb spring of abundance and resource available to us, and just having all these little conversations again and again of like, people want me to be well. People want you to be well. People, it's like, it's here. And, you know, in my life, in my understanding, it feels like that's the healing of, it's one of the core roots of like, we want each other well. And what happens when we actually trust that? I want this person to have this beautiful partnership, this successful business. I want you to buy a fucking Cybertruck if you want, like whatever you want is what I want for you. And to take back our claws and opinions and preferences and judgments and scarcity so that we can actually just lift each other up. And I think that's a model that I want to keep living in. You know, I think I'm not selfish with the gathering of like, that's the kind of place where I want my energy to be, where we're learning together how to want goodness for each other and how to want goodness for ourselves, right? Like, I mean, I was talking to a sister friend this morning who has this new beautiful partner that she's been like praying on for years. And she's like, I can't believe how much I didn't even let myself imagine that this kind of relationship could be possible, right? Like, how are we turning off what we want? We're talking ourselves out of it before we even feel its possibility. And I would prefer for that not to be that way. And we get to use each other. Like it's, I'm not going to have my back every single day. I'm not going to hold the flame of like what's possible for me and what I'm worth and how safe and beautiful I am by myself all the time. It's impossible. And that's where supportive feminine community gets to come and say, hey, I'll hold that for you today. I think you're amazing. I think you're genius. I think you're beautiful. You deserve that. And then you're like, oh, thanks.
Right.
And then we just kind of pass around this community model of care instead of the, like, to your point of that, like the hyper individualized model of like the strong woman. I'm like, how's that working? How is that actually working for you?
Are you tired yet?
You're tired. Exactly. And like taking off like that pretense of like, I have to have it figured out. I have been able to receive, I mean, with the gathering and outside of the gathering, so much more love and care. The more that I'm willing to say, I'm not okay. I need help. I don't have the answers right now. And that doesn't take away from my medicine, my power, my courage, or my genius. And that softening is kind of what it feels like, this offering of the softness and of the truth. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and you're so right in that the actual change and impact that can happen from gatherings like this are based on the model that doesn't just stay isolated to the 4 days in and of itself. It is applied or has the opportunity to be applied in all of our individual lives, the ways that we relate to our families, our beloveds, our peers, our coworkers, infusing all of our relations in our extended community networks with that same presence, authenticity, permission. That has such a tangible ripple effect to make a lasting impact beyond just what an event in itself can do. And that's what I see Temple Belonging really offering, is not just like, like a lot of times at music and arts festivals, it just kind of feels like a party for a weekend, go on vacation. This has the nourishment and the play elements that are so, so nourishing for, our inner children, our inner, like, playtime, playground, party time. And at the same time, we are also, again, rewiring how we relate to ourselves, to each other, how we create and formulate community. And the ways that women also stay in touch after the gathering has been really inspiring to me. And that's why I love it that it's so localized. Like, we get to keep our friendships. We get to keep doing this.
Yeah. And I think we have to, right? Where I think even the other women's gatherings that I've gone to that I have to travel for, just as beautiful, if not more. But if it's not local, if it doesn't actually create community where we live, it feels like only half of the picture, half of the prayer. Where, you mentioned the revillaging, and this feels like skill building for that. Because how many people do we know that have gone into conscious community living situations and they've crashed and burned? Because our brains are super ready for it. Our nervous systems, maybe not so much. And so this feels like skill building. Like, obviously at the gathering, we're learning skills, like we're basket weaving and these kinds of things. And it's relational skill building to create more belonging everywhere we go. Because, belonging isn't something that someone gives you. Belonging is a choice to be in right relationship. right? And I mean, I have like a long-term prayer, pipe dream vision that the gathering is more of like an educational event of belonging and of community building and a right relationship with self, sister, and spirit. That there's actually like a, I don't know, symbol of belonging the course. Not that we need more online courses, but it has that ability, but not by like sitting down and taking notes, but like putting our bodies in the place and being like, oh, what's coming up for me here? Oh, what's coming up for me there? What's coming up for me when I want to buy the ticket? What's coming up for me when I look at the schedule? What's coming up for me when I hear Jenny cracking jokes every day at lunch? You know, just like what we have to practice being in these places that are less consequential before we come into the village. And I don't know what the future looks like. Feels like it's going to be odd. It's already odd and so beautiful. But, you know, I think part of the village or the lack of the current village is because we don't need it. And it's almost like the current cultural and societal structures make village harder than just doing what is like having your own apartment and having your own car and having all your own stuff, right? And I'm not a prophet, but it does feel like these are like good skills to learn so that we remember that we're on the same fucking side. That we do want to be in right relationship with each other, and it doesn't have to depend on whether I like you or not, or if you are into the same kind of stuff as me. There's just this like unconditional positive regard for all of humanity. And it's a really safe container to practice that in, and to have your edges and to be surrounded by other women that are also probably leaning into their edges as well. And then in that way, there's camaraderie at a minimum along the growth edge of, being together in meaningful ways.
Yeah. Last year, I really took away the saying in myself of, if I want belonging, I create belonging. Like, we are the belonging. We are the stewards of belonging. Because so often our little inner child psyche is just constantly searching for a sense of belonging and inclusion, whether we're aware of it consciously or not. Yet we get to be the ones that help steward that and create inclusion, that safety, by allowing the permission slip for ourselves and others to feel like we belong. We are a part of that movement. And honestly, like, I feel like you're right, that temple of belonging offers that playground to experiment. And even with me moving to a more rural area, that's been top of mind of how can I create more of that inclusion in the community around me, to the sense where we actually recognize that regardless of our political beliefs or our backgrounds, this, that, or the other, that we belong to each other because we are a human family. And that's what I think, regardless of whatever happens on the world stage, that's where we're going. That's what humanity needs, is that unity. And we get to start with that with the women here.
Yeah, like a village wasn't an opt-in back in the day. It was literally you lived close to each other, so you're in the same village. It's like it's a measure of physical proximity on planet Earth, right? And that's means something. But nowadays we've become so globalized. I mean, that is a secret prayer that like the gathering is just a little node of anti-globalization for a second, because it's one, so dysregulating at a minimum and a maximum. And, you know, we've lost the art or the desire or the need. Without the need, there's very little desire. Right? Like I don't long for things that I don't need. And so am I actually getting to know my neighbors and the people that share the same water supply that I do, the people that eat from the same soil that I do? Like that's a village. It's very indigenous. It's very earth-based, right? And we've created these villages that are more conceptual and cerebral and belief-based and preference-based. And I think that's fine. That's just part of our time in 2025. And maybe that's really the word, is and. Can we also build skills to be with people that we're sharing like org energy with because of proximity, and to not discount the power of proximity? Feels really important. And, you know, belonging, there's a offshoot of UC Berkeley called the Belonging and Othering Institute that has been really, really fundamental in my like integral studies of belonging, not like the cute Instagram liner belonging. And I teach workshops on this a lot, but part of it really is to build belonging, there has to be mutual responsibility and mutual benefit. And that's hard because not everybody wants mutual responsibility and everyone thinks they need mutual benefit, and or vice versa. And we still have these structures where, like, I created Temple of Belonging. I've done so much of the work by myself and taken all of the financial responsibility myself and risk and all these things. And, you know, I've had to run it through my system where it's like, fuck, what would a different structure be? And it's like, we'd have to build it, and we're not quite there yet. And so I think our hearts are also oriented towards these more shared experiences and actual realities of belonging. And yet we're operating within the rules and the systems and structures that we have. And so that's when, to me, the art of belonging is just relational. Like, this is what we can do now. I'm not personally suited to work on systems and policies. That's not my skill set. I'm more human to human relationships, which is the micro of that macro. But in John Powell's book, Belonging Without Othering, one of the simplest things that I learned from that is othering is an assumption. Belonging is curiosity, right? Or like, he has breaking and bridging stories. A breaking story is an assumption about you or myself. And he talks about how much we other ourselves, maybe more so than we other people, by like, I'm not gonna fit in because it's a rap concert, instead of being like, I don't know what it's gonna feel like until I go, literally. And when we're assuming anything about anybody that we don't know or ourselves, my personal opinion is that is sliding into a bit of like psychosis. Like, we're living in a not real reality when we're assuming. We are literally making shit up.
Wow.
And then taking it as fact. And to me, that's like a little scary. And so curiosity is the antidote. Curiosity is how we build bridges, by saying, you drive, let's go back to the Cybertruck. This person gets out of a Cybertruck and sits down next to me at the bar. How fast am I psychosis myself in this assumptive reality? And how easy/hard would it to be to say, hey, I've been hearing so many weird things about that truck. What's that like for you? Just ask a question. But I think the reason, I should probably stop tangenting because I could go on and on about this, but I think part of the reason we don't ask questions is because it's so much safer to stay inside of our own quiet minds and have our opinions and build walls around it. And we are so terrified of being convinced that our little fantasies of assumptions are not true. And we'd rather be true and wrong than be like connected. You know, it's so much, it's a different energetic. And I think that is the weirder work that I'm really interested in just personally, but with the gathering of just trying to stay curious. You know, people have been concerned that it's like a goddess cult. And I'm like, well, maybe it is. Come and find out. Like, there's only one way to know.
It's really funny.
Why not? Like, maybe somebody comes and they're like, no, that's what this is. And I'm like, great. You're totally allowed to feel that. And whatever. And then, you know, we're all learning how to not take things personally or not make other people's truths our truths. And like, even then, what's wrong with a goddess cult? Who's to say that that's not someone's truth and that that's very authentic and true for them? So how can we just even get curious in the quiet of our own mind to say, what about that? Why do I not like that? Where did that judgment come from? What am I gaining from having a judgment instead of getting more clarity to know what's actually true and real for somebody other than myself? And maybe we should be a goddess cult. I'm not sure. I'm here to do whatever the gathering wants to do. I'm in service.
Wow, yes. Yes, absolutely. Curiosity over judgment all day, every day. Yeah. Gosh, that's such a reprogramming, and it's so embedded.
Like the core.
Yeah, it's like our programming for survival too, the way the primal brain tries to automatically assume things so that we understand our landscape and fill in, like color in the picture around us so our brain knows what to do with things. Like, oh, this is a goddess cult, so therefore, like, my safety mechanism is going to tell me to exit or whatever it might be. Ultimately, we're again reprogramming those safety primal reactions and recognizing the actual reality or truth beyond our own figments of psychosis and assumption, and seeing things for what they are when we get curious of what is actually here and is there something here for me. I love that.
Yeah, it's almost like being our own fact checkers, like our own whistleblowers to be like, oh, look, I am creating a whole reality here, and like on the ground at Temple or like at some of our quarterly events, we have structures in place. We have workshops that are designed to invoke curiosity, right? Because it's not everybody's default setting. And so, my prayer is that we set people up for success all the time in spaces that are just naturally going to be triggering or challenging or filled with judgments, because that's the dominant pattern that we're operating from. And letting people still have it, letting them have their thoughts and their opinions and their feelings, because that's giving people their dignity and their regard, and saying people are allowed to feel that way. Someone is allowed to not like me, and I don't have to take that on, and I think this could spiral out into just how do we relate to ourselves and each other in general, which is probably a much longer conversation.
Well, I know
But
that you host a couple of women's programs that I would imagine dive much deeper. You have truth training, yeah?
truth training is for all folks, but
Cool.
yes, women are the ones that show up the most, frankly.
Do you still do Coyote Council as well?
We haven't done one for a while. The Temple of Belonging takes up a lot of my time. And it's a deep dive. And I think I just love being with people in this, like, kind of spicy, intimate, honest, and really permissive way. And continually iterating of like how to do that. Truth training does want to make a comeback, because this is probably, we really extrapolate some of these concepts out, and it's still a community container, right? There's still a cohort that you move through stuff with, and that is just so infinitely interesting and delicious for me to be in that space with people, to practice getting honest with themselves and getting honest with other people as its own revolution. And it matters, and I'm hoping to do something in another truth training iteration in the springtime. But for now, we got to get Temple Belonging all set up. We got tickets on sale on March 1st, which is right around the corner.
Yes.
And just keep tending to that.
Absolutely. And clearly, for anyone tuning in, Jenny is a wealth of wisdom. So there's so many more ways to deep dive with her, either one-on-one or in the group settings that she curates in person or otherwise. And Temple of Belonging is coming up August 11th through 15th, 2025 in Colton, Oregon, which is about an hour from Portland. And like Jenny said, tickets for this all-inclusive gathering and retreat includes food and so many amazing workshops are officially available March 1st. So Jenny, you've shared so much beauty for us here today. Is there anything else that you want to like just leave us with that's on top of mind or heart?
Non-consensual homework assignment
Here for
would
it.
be to, for 1 week, every time that you want to assume something, flip it into a question and just understand how outrageously curious you actually are about the world.
Outrageously curious. I love that. That's
Because it's like,
juicy.
we're all really judgy. And so if
Yeah.
all of those got flipped into questions, we'd be like overcome by curiosity and wonder, I'm sure.
Yes. Sign me up for that. I will take that on. Yes, please.
Okay, well, I'll have you report back.
Yes, absolutely. I will have my progress report on how I'm doing.
Yeah, there will be grades and golden stars, and this is how we evolve. We need rewards.
Exactly. Yes. And if anyone's feeling curious to come to Temple of Belonging, want more curiosity, ask your questions, you can message me or Jenny, learn more, and also visit the Temple of Belonging on all of the like social platforms and the websites and things, which I will link in. And I hope that you follow your curiosity and meet us there this year because it's going to be absolutely magic.
It sure is. Good time, beauty. It's so good to be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jenny. Yay.